I would love to show you some examples of contemporary artist books. I think it's appropriate to start with one that Julie Chen did when she was still a graduate student here at Mills. She did this in conjunction with Elizabeth McDevitt, who is another student here. This book is called A Tunnel Book. It's actually based on a fairly traditional form, believe it or not. The tunnel books have been around since at least the 19th century and probably the 18th century, but this was completely reimagined. It's called Octopus. This is a book everybody loves. It's a very whimsical book by the artist and writer Mimi Pond, and it was published by Rebus Press in Berkeley, who were some really early adapters to unusual forms. The artist who was responsible for the book, Betsy Davids, always said that every experiment that she did with books was so that she didn't have to learn traditional binding. And so what she did here was to carry through the whimsy about the book by sewing a shower cap onto the spine. So this is not needless to say always called the shower cap book, although it really isn't about showering. This is a book by the artist Susan King, who started making artist books in Los Angeles in the 1970s. And this is a form that was developed by the conservator Haiti Kyle. It has come to be known as the flag book. This is possibly the first artist book that was made as a flag book. And while it looks very traditional, and actually we can function and make it function as if we can read it exactly like a book, we also can do something entirely different with it, which is open it out so that it becomes this beautiful sculptural form, and then you get an entirely different kind of text with this book. So that's the flag book. Susan King also did a book, this book, which has a very unusual double spine. This book is called Treading the Maze, an artist book of days, and the days is spelled D-A-Z-E. It is a book that tells two stories. Susan grew up in the South, and she said there are always two stories. It's a story of a self-imposed sabbatical in Paris that is conjoined with a story about her journey through breast cancer. In the end, this book really becomes a story about being an artist. But the way it works is you have these two spines, and you can open it so that you can interleave the images and the text through the book. So you have total control over the way you want to approach this book. So you have this wonderful ability to interleave this and actually create a lot of the story. Or because of the way it's set up, you can actually look at the images separately and you can read the text separately. So that's the book, Treading the Maze, with a double spine. This book is out of Janus Press in Vermont. Claire Van Vliet is probably one of the best known and most revered artist bookmakers in the country. She was a MacArthur Fellow. She's been making books longer than anyone in this country in terms of book arts, I believe. And this book was done in the 90s by someone who was a student of hers at the time named Barbara Luck. This is called Night Streets, and I think that this book is a very good example of a book that retains the sort of familiarity of the book that as we know it, where we hold it in our hands, we can turn the pages, we can read the text, but we obviously are confronting here something very different. We're not seeing something that looks like a typical book that we would expect. But what it also will do is allow us to approach the book in an entirely different way so that we then see that this book turns into a landscape. In fact, it's a cityscape, and we have access to a whole different way of looking at this book. So it becomes a sculpture, it becomes a piece of art, and every way that we turn it, if you look at it from the back, you're going to get an entirely different picture. It's something that you can manipulate and read in an intimate way. You can certainly present this in a gallery so that it does become, has a very public presence and becomes accessible to a different audience that might not otherwise approach this because it looks too weird. And it just has this sort of glorious ability to express the environment, the city, and the city at night, that cityscape in the middle of the night that these poems are all about, and it just completely brings those to life through its physical presence.